I died on my 28th birthday, choking on cheap ramen in a basement apartment I shared with two strangers. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 10 years working myself to death so my family could thrive, and I ended alone, broke, and forgotten. Then I woke up. I was 17 again, lying in my childhood bed with its faded pink sheets, staring at the water-stained ceiling I'd memorized during countless sleepless nights. My phone, the old model I'd used a decade ago, sat on the nightstand, its screen cracked in the exact same place. The date glowed. March 15th, 2015. The day my parents told me I had to drop out. My hands shook as I sat up. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. But the details were too vivid, too precise. The scratch on my knuckle from yesterday's dish duty, the smell of my mother's cooking wafting up from downstairs, the same meal she'd made that night, the sound of my younger brother Ryan's video games through the thin walls. Ryan. My stomach clenched with a familiar mix of love and resentment. I had 3 hours before dinner, before my parents would sit me down and deliver the news that would derail my entire life. 3 hours before they told me that Ryan's acceptance to Stanford was a blessing for the whole family and that someone had to make sacrifices. That someone was always me. In my first life, I'd cried, I'd begged. I'd shown them my own acceptance letter to UC Berkeley. Not as prestigious as Stanford, but mine, earned through 4 years of perfect grades and countless extracurriculars. I'd pleaded with them to find another way, to take out loans, to let me defer for a year. My father had looked at me with disappointment. Why are you being so selfish? Ryan is gifted. He's going to be somebody. You're a girl. You'll just get married anyway. We need you to work and help support his education. Family comes first. My mother had nodded, her expression sympathetic but firm. You understand, don't you? We're not asking you to give up forever, just a few years. Once Ryan graduates and gets a good job, you can go back to school. Lies, all lies. I'd worked for 10 years. 10 years of double shifts at restaurants, retail stores, warehouses. I sent money home every month. For Ryan's tuition, for his apartment, for his spring break trips, and study abroad programs. I watched from the sidelines as he graduated with honors, as he landed a 6-figure job at a tech startup, as he bought a luxury car and a condo. I asked about going back to school when I was 22. My mother had laughed. At your age? Don't be ridiculous. Besides, Ryan's talking about getting his MBA. You know how expensive that is. I asked again at 25, when Ryan's company went public and he made millions. My father told me to stop being greedy. Ryan worked hard for that money. Just because he's successful doesn't mean he owes you anything. We raised you better than this. I never asked again. The worst part? Ryan never once thanked me. Never acknowledged my sacrifice. At family dinners, the ones I could barely afford to attend, he'd talk about his achievements as if they were his alone. He'd bring his elegant girlfriend, his important friends. He'd barely look at me in my thrift store clothes with my calloused hands and perpetual exhaustion. The last time I saw him was at my father's funeral, 2 months before I died. I'd scraped together money I didn't have to fly home. Ryan arrived in a Tesla, wearing a suit that cost more than my annual rent. At the wake, someone asked what I did for a living. She works retail, my mother said quickly before I could answer. Her voice carried a note of shame, as if my poverty reflected badly on her parenting. Not everyone is ambitious like Ryan. Ryan had smirked. He actually smirked. I left that night and never spoke to them again. When I died alone in that basement, my last thought was wondering if anyone would even notice. Now I had a second chance. I grabbed my laptop, old, slow, but functional, and started making lists. In my previous life, I'd been powerless because I was broke and uneducated. This time would be different. I had something more valuable than money. I had knowledge. I knew which tech companies would explode in value. I knew which cryptocurrencies would surge. I knew about social media platforms before they dominated the market. About streaming services before they killed cable, about a global pandemic that would reshape everything. But more than that, I knew exactly how my family operated. I knew their weaknesses, their patterns, their cruelties, and I was going to use every bit of it. Dinner was exactly as I remembered. Mom's meatloaf, dry and oversalted. Ryan chattering excitedly about Stanford, showing us campus photos on his phone. my parents beaming with pride, already imagining the prestige of saying my son goes to Stanford. I ate in silence, watching them with new eyes. My mother, so eager to live vicariously through her children, measuring worth by status and accomplishments. My father, old-fashioned, sexist, convinced that investing in daughters was a waste. Ryan, spoiled, entitled, oblivious to anything beyond his own desires. They'd ruined me once. They wouldn't get the chance again. "Sweetheart," my mother said, her voice taking on that particular gentle tone that meant bad news was coming. "We need to talk about your plans for next year. Here it comes." "I know you were hoping to go to Berkeley," my father said gruffly. "But we've been looking at the numbers, and with Ryan's tuition—" "I understand," I said calmly. They blinked, surprised. In my first life, this conversation had lasted hours, full of tears and arguments. "You do?" My mother's relief was palpable. "Of course, Ryan's opportunity is incredible. Stanford is a much better school than Berkeley." I smiled at my brother, who puffed up with pride. It makes sense to invest in the best prospects. My father nodded, satisfied. "I'm glad you're being mature about this. We'll need you to start working full-time after graduation. Ryan's tuition is $60,000 a year, and that's not including room and board, textbooks, fees. Whatever the family needs," I said sweetly. Ryan grinned at me, oblivious. "Thanks, sis. I promise I'll make it worth it. Once I'm successful, I'll totally help you out." I remembered those words. He'd said them so easily, so sincerely. And then he'd forgotten them the moment they became inconvenient. "I know you will," I lied. That night, I began executing my plan. Step 1, money. I couldn't do anything without capital, and I had exactly $2,847 in my savings account from years of birthday gifts and part-time work. In my first life, I'd handed it all over to help with Ryan's first semester. This time, I opened an investment account. The problem was being 17. Most platforms required you to be 18, but I knew a workaround, a small startup that would later be acquired by a major brokerage firm. Their age verification was glitchy. I created an account, lying about my birth year, and deposited my entire savings. Bitcoin was trading at $245. I bought as much as I could. Then I waited. In a few months, I'd turn 18 and could start using legitimate platforms. In the meantime, I needed to prepare. Step 2, education. I couldn't go to Berkeley. My parents would never allow it now, and even if I fought them, I'd lose years arguing and would still end up in the same place. But I didn't need a traditional university. I needed skills and credentials. I spent every night researching online programs, free courses, certification tracks. MIT had just launched their first batch of open courseware. Stanford, ironically, offered free online computer science classes. I enrolled in everything I could find. I started with coding. In my previous life, I'd watched the tech boom from the sidelines, serving coffee to programmers who made more in a month than I made in a year. I'd always wondered what they knew that I didn't. Now I'd find out. The syntax was difficult at first. My brain, still adjusting to being 17 again, struggled with the logic. But I had something most learners didn't: desperation. Every line of code I learned was armor against my family's plans. Every tutorial I completed was a step toward freedom. I barely slept. After dinner with my family, where I played the role of the dutiful daughter, I'd retreat to my room and code until 2 a.m. Then, I'd wake at 5 to study before school. My mother noticed the dark circles under my eyes. "Are you feeling okay? You look exhausted." "Just studying hard," I said. "Want to finish strong before I start working." She smiled, pleased. She thought I meant high school. She had no idea I was teaching myself skills that would make me more valuable than Ryan ever would be. Step 3, the job. My parents expected me to start working immediately after graduation. In my first life, I'd taken a job at a local diner, minimum wage plus tips. It had been soul-crushing work, standing for 10-hour shifts, dealing with rude customers, smelling like grease and coffee. This time, I aimed higher. There was a small tech company in the city, barely a startup, just 5 people working out of a renovated warehouse. I knew about it because in my previous life, One of my regular customers at the diner had worked there. He'd always tipped well and talked about his job, about how the company was going to revolutionize cloud storage. The company was called Streamline. In 2024, it would be worth $8 billion. In 2015, they were hiring a receptionist. I applied the day after my 18th birthday, using skills I'd learned from online tutorials to make my resume look professional. I had no real experience, but I wrote a cover letter that demonstrated I understood their product. I'd visited their bare-bones website, read their few blog posts, and taught myself enough about cloud infrastructure to sound knowledgeable. They called me in for an interview. The office was exactly as I remembered from my customers' descriptions. Exposed brick, mismatched furniture, whiteboards covered in diagrams and code. The 5 founders were all men in their late 20s, dressed in hoodies and jeans. "You're young," said Marcus Chen, the CEO. He'd be on the cover of Forbes in 7 years. "You just graduated high school?" "Yes, but I've been teaching myself programming and business management. I know you're looking for a receptionist, but I can do more than answer phones. I can help with documentation, basic coding tasks, customer support." "You know how to code?" Another founder, Jason Wu, future CTO, looked skeptical. I'd anticipated this. I pulled out my laptop and showed them a simple program I'd written, a tool that organized files by metadata. It wasn't sophisticated, but it was functional. They exchanged glances. "The job pays $12 an hour," Marcus said. "And honestly, it's pretty boring work. You'll be scheduling meetings, ordering supplies, answering emails. We can't promise it'll lead anywhere." "That's okay," I said. "I just want to learn." I got the job. My parents were disappointed. They'd hoped I'd find something that paid more, but they were mollified when I promised to contribute $1,200 a month to Ryan's expenses. It was more than half my paycheck, but I could afford it. My Bitcoin investment had already tripled. The first few months at Streamline were exactly as Marcus had warned, boring. I scheduled meetings, ordered lunch, maintained the calendar. But I watched everything. I listened to every conversation, read every email I could access, absorbed how the company operated, and I made myself indispensable. When the founders worked late, I worked late. When they needed coffee, I had it ready. When they complained about administrative tasks piling up, I offered to help. Slowly, I took on more responsibility, managing their social media, writing blog posts, handling basic customer inquiries. I never asked for a raise or a new title. I just worked. "You're really good at this," Jason said one evening, watching me troubleshoot a customer's problem over email. "Have you thought about learning more technical stuff? We could use someone who bridges the gap between tech and communication." "I'd love that," I said. He started teaching me. Late nights after everyone else had left, Jason would walk me through their codebase, explaining architecture decisions, showing me how to debug. He was a good teacher, patient, thorough. He had no idea he was training his future boss. At home, I played my role perfectly. I attended family dinners, smiled through Ryan's endless stories about Stanford life, sent money every month without complaint. My parents praised me for being responsible and mature. Ryan barely acknowledged me at all. During his winter break freshman year, he came home with stories of incredible opportunities, famous professors, brilliant classmates. My parents hung on every word. "There's this startup competition," he said over Christmas dinner. "The prize is $100,000 in mentorship from Silicon Valley investors. My team is working on an app idea. It's going to be huge." "That's wonderful," my mother gushed. "What's the app?" Ryan launched into an explanation that made it clear he only vaguely understood his own idea. It was a social media platform for college students, focused on study groups and class notes. I bit my tongue. I knew exactly how that would turn out. His team would place third, win $10,000, and the app would die within 6 months because none of them understood user acquisition or monetization. "What about you?" Ryan asked, clearly just being polite. "How's the secretary job?" "Receptionist," I corrected. "It's good. I'm learning a lot." "That's nice." He said it the way you'd comment on someone's mediocre hobby. "Are you ever going to go to college? I mean, you could probably get into a community college or something." My mother frowned. "Ryan, that's not necessary right now. Your sister is helping the family." Right. I just think it's a waste, you know? She was pretty smart in high school." He said it like it was ancient history, like I was a relic from another era. I smiled. Maybe someday. Cool, cool. He'd already lost interest, turning back to our parents. So anyway, there's this amazing opportunity for summer internships. I excused myself and went to my room, where I checked my portfolio. Bitcoin had hit $450. My initial investment of $2,847 was now worth $5,238. Not enough yet, but growing. I had time. The next 2 years followed a careful pattern. At Streamline, I evolved from receptionist to operations coordinator to technical project manager. My salary increased to $45,000 a year, modest by tech standards, but incredible compared to what I'd made in my first life. I still sent money home. My parents never questioned why my contributions stayed the same even as my salary grew. They assumed I was spending the extra on myself, which I was in a way. I was spending it on my future. By 2017, my Bitcoin was worth $47,000. I sold half and diversified, buying stock in companies I knew would surge, investing in index funds, keeping a cash reserve. The other half I held, knowing it would eventually peak at nearly $70,000 per coin. I also completed my online education. I earned certificates from Stanford, MIT, and Harvard in computer science, business management, and data analysis. None of them were real degrees in my parents' eyes, but they were recognized in the tech industry, and that was all that mattered. Streamline was growing too. The team expanded from 5 to 50, then to 200. We moved into a real office building. Marcus raised $20 million in Series A funding, then $80 million in Series B. My role grew with the company. I managed projects, led teams, interfaced with investors. Marcus called me into his office one day in late 2017. "We need to talk about your career path." I'd been expecting this. "Okay. You've been here since nearly the beginning. You've grown with us, taken on more responsibility, never complained. But we're at a point where we need to formalize things." He leaned back in his chair. "I want to make you director of operations. It comes with a significant raise. $120,000 base plus equity. You'd be managing a team of 20 and overseeing all our operational efficiency initiatives." It was a dream offer. In my first life, I'd never made more than $35,000 a year. "I accept," I said. He grinned. "Don't you want to negotiate?" "The salary is fair, but I do have one request." "Name it." "I want a clear path to VP level within 2 years, contingent on performance. And I want formal mentorship from you and Jason on executive leadership." Marcus studied me. "You're 20 and you're already thinking about VP roles?" "I'm thinking about where this company is going and where I can provide the most value. In 2 years, you'll be preparing for acquisition or IPO. You'll need experienced leaders who understand the company's foundation. I've been here since the beginning. I know every system, every process, every relationship. If I can develop the strategic skills to match that institutional knowledge, I'll be invaluable." He laughed. "When did you get so ambitious?" "I've always been ambitious," I said. "I just had to wait for the right opportunity. I got the promotion. I got the equity. 30,000 shares that would eventually be worth millions. At home, I was still the dutiful daughter who sent $1,200 every month. Ryan graduated from Stanford in 2018 with honors, just as I remembered. My parents threw him a huge party, inviting every relative and family friend. They rented a hall, hired a catering company, made speeches about his achievements. I came to the party in my best dress, still from a discount store because I was saving every extra dollar, and watched from the sidelines as Ryan received congratulations and praise. "You must be so proud of your brother," one of my aunts said to me. "Very proud," I agreed. "And what are you doing these days?" "I work at a tech company, operations management." "Oh, how nice." She said it the way people do when they're not really interested. "Is that like administrative assistant?" "Something like that." She patted my hand. "Well, it's good that you're working. Not everyone is cut out for university." I smiled and excused myself. In the bathroom, I checked my phone. My portfolio had crossed $200,000. Streamline's Series C funding had just closed at a $500 million valuation, making my equity worth approximately $1.2 million on paper. I looked at myself in the mirror, at my cheap dress, my practical shoes, my simple makeup. To everyone here, I was the failure. The daughter who'd sacrificed her dreams, who worked a nice job, who would probably never amount to much. They had no idea. Ryan got a job at a prestigious tech company, the same one I remembered, with the same six-figure salary. My parents were ecstatic. They talked about it for months, telling everyone they met about their son, the software engineer. He moved to San Francisco into a luxury apartment in Soma. My parents helped with the security deposit, money I'd sent them for family expenses. I didn't say anything. Ryan called me once from his new place. "Hey, so I know you've been helping Mom and Dad send me money all these years. I just wanted to say thanks. I'm going to start paying them back now that I have a good salary." "That's great," I said. He never did pay them back. Within 3 months, he was talking about how expensive San Francisco was, how he was barely scraping by on $150,000 a year. My parents sympathized and told him not to worry about it. Meanwhile, I got promoted to VP of Operations at Streamline. My salary jumped to $180,000 plus bonuses. My equity package increased. I was 21 years old and managing a department of 60 people. I still sent $1,200 home every month. My parents never asked about my job beyond basic pleasantries. When I mentioned I'd been promoted, my mother said, "That's nice, dear," and immediately changed the subject to Ryan's latest project at work. It didn't hurt anymore. In my first life, their indifference had crushed me. This time, I understood it for what it was. They'd written my story before I'd had a chance to live it. To them, I was the supporting character in Ryan's narrative. Nothing I achieved would change that. So I stopped trying to change it. I stopped seeking their approval or recognition. I took their calls, attended family dinners when I visited home, played my role, and I built my empire in silence. By 2020, everything changed, just as I knew it would. The pandemic hit, the world shut down, and suddenly every company was desperate for the kind of cloud infrastructure Streamline provided. Our user base exploded. Our valuation hit $3 billion. Marcus started preparing for an IPO. I was ready. I'd spent 5 years learning every aspect of our business, building relationships with investors and board members, proving my value over and over. When Marcus announced his plan to take the company public, he told me I'd be one of the key executives in the new structure. "Chief Operating Officer," he said. "You'll oversee all operational aspects of the company. It's a big job. Probably 80-hour weeks for the next year. Are you ready for that?" I thought about my first life, where I'd worked 80-hour weeks at minimum wage jobs that destroyed my body and gave me nothing in return. "I'm ready," I said. The IPO happened in early 2021. Streamline went public at $45 per share. By the end of the first day, we'd closed at $73. My equity was suddenly worth $8.4 million. So I was 23 years old. I called my parents that night, thinking maybe now they'd see me differently. Maybe now they'd understand that I'd achieved something remarkable. "That's wonderful, honey," my mother said. "Listen, can we talk about Ryan? He's thinking about business school, and you know how expensive those programs are." I sat in my apartment, a beautiful 2-bedroom in the city with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the bay, and listened to her explain why Ryan needed money for his MBA. He's going to apply to Harvard and Stanford. The tuition alone is nearly $150,000 for 2 years, and then there's living expenses, networking events, spring break trips to build relationships. "I'm sure he can take out loans," I said. "Oh, but the interest rates." And Ryan says that everyone he went to Stanford with who got into top MBA programs had family support. He doesn't want to be the poor scholarship student. So Ryan was making $180,000 a year. He had no student debt from undergrad. I'd helped pay for that. He'd had every advantage. "I can't help with this one," I said. "I need to save for my own future." There was a long silence. "I see," my mother said, her voice cooling. "I suppose now that you have some money, you don't care about family anymore." "That's not fair." "Fair? You want to talk about fair? We raised you, fed you, clothed you. Ryan is trying to better himself, and you're being selfish." I hung up on her. It was the first time I'd ever done that. She didn't call back. Over the next year, I transformed myself completely. I hired a stylist, updated my wardrobe, got a personal trainer. I attended executive coaching sessions, took leadership courses, built my network. I also started planning my next move. Streamline was successful, but I could see its limitations. Marcus was a brilliant technologist, but a mediocre businessman. He'd made strategic errors, partnerships that didn't pan out, product decisions that alienated users. The company was still growing, but not as fast as it could be, and I started researching acquisition targets, companies that complemented our strengths and addressed our weaknesses. I presented my findings to the board, showed them how we could accelerate growth through strategic purchases. They were impressed. They authorized me to lead our M&A strategy. One of the companies I identified was called Technova, a mid-sized firm that provided enterprise software solutions. They had about 300 employees, solid revenue, but were struggling with innovation and market positioning. They were also Ryan's employer. I'd known Ryan worked there, of course. I'd engineered this entire situation. Technova was a good acquisition target regardless, but the fact that Ryan worked there was a delicious bonus. And I brought the opportunity to Marcus and the board, presenting a detailed analysis of Technova's value and how it fit our strategic goals. I didn't mention my personal connection. Why would I? It was irrelevant to the business case. The board approved the acquisition. Streamline purchased Technova for $400 million. I was appointed to oversee the integration. The announcement went out on a Tuesday morning. I was in the office when my phone rang. Ryan calling for the first time in 8 months. "Did you know about this?" he demanded. "Know about what?" "Streamline buying my company. You work there, don't you? Did you know?" "I'm aware of the acquisition, yes." "This is insane. Nobody told us anything. We just got an email saying we'd been purchased and there would be organizational changes. What does that mean? Am I going to lose my job?" "I can't discuss details of the integration process," I said professionally, "but I'm sure you'll receive more information soon." "Can't you find out for me? You work in operations or whatever, right? You must have some connections." "Operations or whatever," as if my role was too insignificant to remember. "I'll see what I can do," I lied. I hung up and smiled. The integration process was brutal by design. I'd learned from previous acquisitions that the key to success was swift, decisive action. Cut redundancies immediately, merge systems quickly, establish new reporting structures before people could form resistance. I led the transition team personally, and we analyzed every position at Technova, evaluating performance, redundancies, and strategic fit. Many roles were eliminated, not out of cruelty, but out of efficiency. We kept the strongest performers and those with unique skills. Ryan's name came across my desk in the second round of evaluations. His performance reviews were mediocre. He was a decent coder, but not exceptional. His managers noted that he was adequate and meets expectations. The corporate kiss of death. He'd been coasting on his Stanford degree and his initial hire, doing the minimum required while expecting promotions based on tenure. In other words, he was exactly who I'd thought he'd become. The recommendation from the integration team was termination. His role was redundant with several streamlined positions, and his performance didn't justify retention. I could have saved him. As COO, I had the authority to override the recommendation, to find him a position somewhere in the organization. I approved the termination. 3 weeks after the acquisition closed, Ryan received his notice. He called me immediately, panicked. "They're letting me go. This is insane. I've been here for 4 years. I'm a good employee. I'm sorry," I said. "The integration process is complex. A lot of difficult decisions have to be made. Can you help me? Can you talk to someone? You're a VP or whatever, right? You must have some pull." "VP or whatever." "I'm actually COO," I said. "Chief Operating Officer." There was a long silence. "What?" "I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Streamline. I have been with the company for 6 years. I'm the one who led the Technova acquisition." Another silence, longer this time. You were involved in this?" "I led it." "And you didn't think to mention that to me? To warn me? To help your own brother?" I could have pointed out that he'd never asked about my job, never shown interest in my career, never once acknowledged the years I'd spent supporting his dreams. I could have reminded him of every dismissive comment, every time he'd treated me like I was beneath him, and instead I said, "Business is business, Ryan. I'm sure you understand." This is bullshit. You're doing this on purpose. You're jealous that I went to Stanford and you didn't, so you're sabotaging my career. I almost laughed. He truly believed that. He truly thought this was about jealousy, about status, about a college he'd attended 7 years ago. He had no idea this was about justice. "I need to go," I said. "I have a meeting." "Wait." I hung up. He called back 16 times. I didn't answer. Ryan showed up at my apartment that night. I don't know how he got my address. Probably called our parents, and they got it somehow. He buzzed the intercom, desperate. I let him up. He looked terrible. His hair was messy, his eyes red. He'd been crying. "Please," he said when I opened the door. "Please, you have to help me. I can't lose this job. I have rent, car payments, student loans from my MBA. "You went to business school?" "Yeah, Harvard. I graduated last year, but the loans are brutal, like $200,000, and I needed the salary from Technova to manage the payments." So he'd gone to Harvard Business School after all. My parents must have found a way to help him. I wondered how much of that money had come from the checks I'd been sending home. "I'm sorry you're in this position," I said, "but I can't help you. It would be unethical to show favoritism to family members." "Unethical? Are you serious right now? I'm your brother." "Exactly. Which is why it would be inappropriate for me to intervene in a personnel decision." "I can't believe you. After everything?" "After everything what?" I asked. "After everything our family did for you? The sacrifices that were made? The opportunities you were given?" He stared at me. "What are you talking about?" "Do you remember why you got to go to Stanford?" "Because I earned it. I was a good student." "You were a good student," I agreed. "So was I. I got into Berkeley. Did you know that?" I think Mom mentioned something about that once. "I got into Berkeley with a partial scholarship, but our parents decided they couldn't afford to send both of us to college. So they made a choice. They asked me to drop out and work to help pay for your education." His face paled. I knew you were working, but I thought that was your choice." "My choice," I repeated. "I was 17 years old. I wanted to go to college more than anything. But our parents told me that you were the priority, that you were gifted, that you'd go further. They told me I'd get my chance later." "Did you? Did they help you go back to school?" I laughed, and it came out bitter. "No, Ryan. They never helped me. Every time I asked, they said they couldn't afford it, because you needed money for your MBA or your apartment or your networking events. For 10 years, I sent money home every month. Money that went to support your life. I didn't ask you to do that." "No, you just accepted it. You took every advantage, every opportunity, every dollar, and you never once asked where it came from. You never thanked me. You never even acknowledged me." He looked stricken. I'm sorry. I didn't realize, and of course you didn't realize, because you never looked. To you, I was just your older sister who made the safe choice, who wasn't ambitious, who worked some office job and lived a boring life. You never asked about my work because you assumed it wasn't interesting. You never asked about my dreams because you assumed I didn't have any." "That's not true. When was the last time you asked me a question about my life that wasn't just small talk? When was the last time you showed any genuine interest in who I am or what I do?" He opened his mouth and closed it again. He couldn't answer. "Here's what actually happened," I said. "While you were at Stanford making friends and joining clubs, I was teaching myself to code after working 10-hour shifts. While you were doing study abroad in Barcelona, I was taking online courses from MIT at 2 a.m. While you were networking at business school, I was building a career from nothing. I had no degree, no connections, no support, just determination and intelligence that our parents decided wasn't worth investing in." "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I really am. I didn't know." "And now you're asking me to save your job, to show you favoritism, to give you another advantage you haven't earned." I shook my head. "I'm not going to do that. You're being let go because you're mediocre, Ryan. Your performance reviews are average. You're replaceable. That's not my fault. It's yours." Please, I'll do anything. I'll work harder. It's already done. The decision has been made. Tears ran down his face. I can't believe you hate me this much. I don't hate you, I said, and I realized it was true. I just don't prioritize you above what's right. That's something our family never taught me. They taught me that your needs always came first, that your success was more important than my dignity. But I learned different lessons. I learned that fairness matters, that merit matters. That family doesn't mean enabling someone's mediocrity at the expense of everything else. What am I supposed to do? The same thing I did, figure it out. He left my apartment broken. Part of me felt guilty. The part that remembered loving my little brother, who'd played video games with me and laughed at my jokes before Stanford changed him. But the larger part felt free. The acquisition was a massive success. Technova's enterprise clients loved Streamline's cloud infrastructure, and Streamline's users appreciated Technova's enterprise features. Revenue jumped 40% in the first quarter post-acquisition. The board was thrilled. Marcus was thrilled. I received a substantial bonus and additional equity. My parents called 3 days after Ryan was fired. How could you do this to your own brother? My mother demanded. I didn't do anything to him. His position was eliminated during a corporate restructuring. You're a senior executive. You could have protected him. That would be nepotism. It's called taking care of family. Her voice broke. Do you know what this has done to him? He's depressed. He can't make his loan payments. He might have to move back home. He's 26 years old with a Harvard MBA and 4 years of experience at a reputable company. He'll find another job. You've always been jealous of him, my father interjected. I hadn't realized he was on the line too. Ever since he got into Stanford, you couldn't stand that he was more successful than you. I could have argued. I could have listed my achievements, my salary, my net worth. I could have thrown my success in their faces and demanded they see me. But what would be the point? They'd decided who I was 17 years ago. No amount of evidence would change their minds. If that's what you think, I said. We raised you better than this, my mother said. We taught you the importance of family, but you've become cold and selfish. I don't even recognize you anymore. Maybe you never knew me at all, I said, and hung up. They didn't call back. Ryan sent me a series of increasingly desperate texts over the following weeks. He'd applied to dozens of jobs but wasn't getting offers. The market was competitive and he didn't stand out. He'd had to move to a cheaper apartment. He was behind on his loan payments. I didn't respond. Then the text changed tone. He wasn't begging anymore. He was angry. You ruined my life. This is all your fault. I hope you're happy. Mom and Dad are right about you. I blocked his number. 3 months later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Ryan had found a job, a significant step down from Technova, at a smaller company with lower pay, but it was something. He'd moved back home with our parents temporarily to save money. I felt nothing. Streamline continued to grow. We made 2 more acquisitions, companies I'd identified and evaluated. My equity package expanded. By my 25th birthday, my net worth crossed $30 million. I bought a house in the hills with a view that stretched for miles. I traveled to places I'd only dreamed about in my first life, Paris, Tokyo, the Maldives. I built a life that was entirely mine, and I never sent another check home, and the final act came 2 years later. Streamline announced it was opening a new regional headquarters in my hometown, the mid-sized city where I'd grown up, where my family still lived. We needed space to expand, and the city offered tax incentives and cheaper real estate than San Francisco. As COO, I was tasked with overseeing the new location. It made sense. I knew the area, understood the local business culture, could navigate relationships with the city officials. I volunteered to relocate temporarily to manage the setup. The new office was impressive, a renovated historic building in the revitalized downtown, with modern interiors and all the Silicon Valley perks. We were hiring 200 people locally, bringing jobs and investment to an area that desperately needed both. The mayor gave a speech at our ribbon-cutting ceremony, praising Streamline's commitment to the community. Local press covered the story extensively. My parents saw the news. My mother called me for the first time in 2 years. I saw that your company opened an office here. Are you involved with that? I'm overseeing it, I said. I'll be based here for the next 6 months to manage the transition. Oh, a long pause. Maybe we could have dinner? It's been so long since we've seen you. Yeah, I thought about all the dinners I'd sat through, watching them celebrate Ryan while dismissing me. All the times I'd swallowed my hurt and played my role. Sure, I said. How about Saturday? We met at a nice restaurant, the kind of place my parents would never have taken me to when I was young, but that they agreed to readily when I suggested it. They were impressed when the hostess greeted me by name when the manager came over to say hello. They looked older. My father's hair had gone completely gray. My mother had new lines around her eyes. We made awkward small talk through appetizers. Then, my mother finally said what she'd been building up to. We were wondering if you might be hiring for the new office. Ryan has been looking for better opportunities, and with his experience— No, I said. She blinked. What? I'm not hiring Ryan. I'm not giving him a job, a referral, or a recommendation. My father's jaw tightened. We're your family. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? I asked calmly. Let me think. You forced me to drop out of high school and work to fund Ryan's education. You took the money I sent you every month, thousands of dollars over 10 years, and spent it on Ryan's lifestyle. You dismissed my achievements and mocked my ambitions. You told me I was selfish when I wouldn't sacrifice more. What part of that is everything you've done for me? We raised you, my mother protested. We fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head. That's called basic parenting. That's the bare minimum. That's not something I owe you for. How dare you? I dropped out of high school to pay for Ryan's college, I said, my voice steady. Did you know that I was accepted to Berkeley? That I had a partial scholarship? That going to college was my dream? They exchanged glances. We made a difficult choice, my father said. We couldn't afford both of you. You could have taken loans. You could have asked Ryan to go to a cheaper school. You could have split the support between us. But instead, you decided that his dreams were worth everything and mine were worth nothing. I leaned forward. Do you know what I did after you told me I had to work instead of going to college? They shook their heads. I taught myself to code. I took online courses from top universities, Stanford, MIT, Harvard. I worked full-time and studied every night until 2 a.m. I built skills, made connections, proved my value. I started as a receptionist at a tiny startup, and I worked my way up through pure competence and determination. Everything I have, I earned myself. You gave me nothing but obstacles. That's not fair, my mother whispered. We did the best we could. No, you did what was easiest. You took the path of least resistance. It was easier to sacrifice me than to make hard choices. It was easier to invest in Ryan than to believe I was worth investing in. I pulled out my phone and showed them an article about Streamline's latest valuation. This company is worth $8 billion. I own 1.5% of it. Do the math. My father's eyes widened as he calculated. That's $120 million, I said. My equity is currently worth $120 million, and that's not counting my salary, bonuses, or other investments. I'm 27 years old, and I'm worth more money than you'll see in 10 lifetimes. They stared at me. And Ryan? I continued. Ryan, who you sacrificed me for. He's working at a mid-level company making decent money, drowning in MBA debt, living a completely average life. He's not special. He never was. You just convinced yourselves he was because you needed to justify what you did to me. We didn't know, my mother said weakly. We didn't know you'd be so successful. You didn't care enough to find out. Even when I told you about my promotions, you changed the subject to Ryan. Even when I tried to share my achievements, you dismissed them. You wrote my story without ever asking me what I wanted it to be. Please, my father said, and I'd never heard him beg before. We made mistakes. We see that now, but we're still your family. Can't we move forward? I considered them. They looked small suddenly, diminished. In my first life, their approval had meant everything. Their rejection had nearly destroyed me. Now I felt nothing but a distant pity. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I'm going to pay for this dinner because I can afford it and you probably can't. Then I'm going to leave, and we're not going to have a relationship. I'm not giving Ryan a job. I'm not sending you money. I'm not attending family events. I'm done. You can't mean that, my mother said, tears streaming down her face. I do. You taught me that family means sacrifice, that love is measured by what you're willing to give up. Well, I'm sacrificing you. I'm giving up the fantasy that you'll ever see me as anything but the daughter who didn't matter enough to invest in. I stood up. Goodbye. And I left them at the table and walked out into the night. I felt lighter than I had in years. The Streamline regional office thrived. We hired talented local people, contributed to the community, became a cornerstone of the city's growing tech scene. I was featured in business magazines, interviewed about bringing opportunities to mid-sized markets. My parents saw the articles. The whole town saw them. Everyone knew that I'd become exactly what they'd assumed I'd never be. Someone important, someone successful, someone worth paying attention to. Aside, I occasionally heard through mutual acquaintances about my family. Ryan had found a stable job but was struggling with debt and resentment. My parents had aged rapidly, weighed down by regret and the realization of what they'd lost. I didn't reach out. On my 30th birthday, I threw myself a party at my house in the hills. 200 people came. Friends, colleagues, mentors who'd helped me along the way. Marcus gave a toast about how I'd been with Streamline from the beginning, how I'd helped build something remarkable. Jason pulled me aside at one point. You know what I remember most about when we first hired you? He asked. What? You were so young, so inexperienced. But you had this quality, this determination. Like you were running from something or toward something, I could never tell which. You worked harder than anyone I'd ever met. I had a lot to prove, I said. To who? I thought about my family, about the version of myself who'd died alone and forgotten, about the girl who'd been told her dreams didn't matter. To myself, I said. Later that night, I stood on my balcony looking out over the city. In the distance, I could see the lights of my hometown where my parents were probably sitting in their modest house, where Ryan was probably complaining about his job. I thought about my first life, about the pain and powerlessness and waste. I thought about the choice I'd been given, to accept my fate or to fight for something better. I'd chosen to fight, and I'd won. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I opened it. I'm sorry for everything. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm proud of you. I always should have been. Ryan. I read it twice, then deleted it. Some apologies come too late. I went back inside to my party, to my friends, to the life I'd built from nothing. Tomorrow, I'd go back to work, to the challenges and opportunities that came with running a billion-dollar company. I'd make decisions that affected thousands of people. I'd continue building something that mattered, but tonight I celebrated. Not because I'd gotten revenge, though I had. Not because I'd proven my family wrong, though I had. I celebrated because I'd saved myself. I'd been given a second chance, and I'd used it not just to succeed, but to become exactly who I was always meant to be. Someone who didn't need anyone's permission to matter. The girl who died alone in a basement apartment was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd built an empire. And that was the sweetest victory of all. Epilogue, 5 years later. The email came on a Tuesday morning. Subject, Streamline acquisition complete. After months of negotiations, Amazon had purchased Streamline for $12 billion. My 1.5% stake was now worth $180 million in cash, plus additional Amazon stock. I was 35 years old and I never had to work another day in my life, but I wasn't done yet. I'd been planning my next venture for 2 years, a fund that invested in women and minorities in tech, specifically those who'd taken non-traditional paths to the industry. People like me who'd had to claw their way up without family support or prestigious degrees. I called it Second Chance Capital. The irony wasn't lost on me. We launched with $500 million in capital, $200 million of my own money, the rest from investors who believed in the mission. Our thesis was simple. Talent is universal, but opportunity isn't. We'd find the people who'd been overlooked, underestimated, or written off, and we'd give them the resources to build something extraordinary. The applications poured in, Thousands of them from every background imaginable. Single mothers who'd taught themselves to code, immigrants working 3 jobs while building startups, people who'd been told they weren't good enough, smart enough, connected enough. I read every application myself. One came from a 23-year-old woman named Maria. She'd dropped out of community college to care for her sick mother, worked as a night janitor, and taught herself data science through free online courses. She'd built a prototype for software that could predict hospital readmissions, potentially saving the healthcare system billions. She had no degree, no connections, and $3,000 in savings. I invited her to pitch. She was nervous, stumbling over her words, clearly intimidated by our sleek office and the panel of successful investors. But her eyes lit up when she talked about her software, about the potential to help people, about the dreams she'd had to defer. I saw myself in her. We funded her, $1 million seed investment to build her team and develop the product. 2 years later, her company was valued at $50 million. She'd been featured in Forbes, spoken at conferences, become exactly the kind of success story that inspires others. She sent me a thank you note. You gave me a chance when no one else would. You saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. I'll never forget that. I kept the note on my desk. My parents reached out one last time after the Amazon acquisition made headlines. My mother sent a letter, actual handwritten pages, not an email. Dear daughter, we've seen the news about your success, and we want you to know how proud we are. We always knew you were special, even if we didn't show it well. We made mistakes, terrible mistakes, and we live with that regret every day. Your father and I are getting older. He's not well, his heart, the doctors say. We don't have much time left, and we don't want to die knowing that you hate us. We understand if you can't forgive us. But please know that we love you. We always have. Mom. I read the letter in my office, overlooking the city where I'd built my empire. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. I thought about forgiveness, about what it means and who it serves. In stories, this is where the protagonist has a revelation, where she realizes that holding on to anger only hurts herself, that family is everything, that love conquers all. But this wasn't a story. This was my life. And the truth was, I didn't hate my parents. Hate requires energy, investment, care. I'd moved beyond that years ago. I also didn't forgive them. Forgiveness implies that what they did was forgivable, that their regret earned them absolution. It doesn't. What I felt was indifference. They were people I used to know who'd made choices that hurt me, who were now living with the consequences. That was their journey, not mine. I wrote back, a short email, because that's all it deserved. I don't hate you. I also don't have space in my life for you. I hope you find peace. Your daughter. I didn't sign it with my name. My father died 8 months later. My mother sent me the funeral details. I didn't attend. Ryan sent me one last message. He asked for you at the end. He said he was sorry. I didn't respond. Some doors, once closed, should stay that way. On my 40th birthday, I stood in front of a room of 500 women, entrepreneurs, executives, students, dreamers. I'd been invited to give the keynote at a conference for women in tech. I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you, I said. Success isn't about revenge. It's not about proving people wrong. It's not even about achievement. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Success is about freedom. It's about building a life where no one else gets to write your story, where you're not beholden to family expectations or societal scripts or anyone else's limited imagination. I told them my story, not all of it, but enough. The sacrifice, the struggle, the determination, the rebirth, both literal and metaphorical. People will underestimate you, I said. They'll tell you what you can't do, who you can't be. They'll ask you to make yourself smaller so they can feel bigger. And you have a choice. You can believe them, or you can prove them irrelevant. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 20, with nervous energy and hopeful eyes. Thank you for your speech, she said. It really resonated with me. My family wants me to quit school and work to support my brother's education. They say it's just temporary, but you know it won't be, I finished. She nodded, tears forming. What do I do? I thought about myself at 17, about the choice I didn't get to make the first time around. You say no, I told her. You finish school, you build your skills, you create options for yourself, and you remember that anyone who asks you to sacrifice your dreams for theirs doesn't actually love you. They love what you can do for them. But they're my family. Family is supposed to lift you up, not hold you down. If they're asking you to give up your future, they're not acting like family. They're acting like parasites. I softened my tone. I know it's hard. I know it feels impossible. But I promise you, the temporary pain of disappointing them is nothing compared to the permanent pain of betraying yourself. She hugged me, this stranger whose story could have been mine. Be brave, I whispered. She left with her shoulders squared, her spine straight. I'd saved her the way no one had saved me. And that felt like the truest form of success. That night, I returned to my home, a sprawling estate in wine country, with gardens and a library and space to breathe. I poured myself a glass of expensive wine and sat on my terrace, watching the stars. I thought about the girl I'd been in my first life, the one who'd worked herself to death for people who didn't appreciate her, the one who'd believed that love meant sacrifice, that family meant obligation, that her worth was measured by what she could give to others, like she'd been wrong about so much. But she'd been right about one thing. She'd deserved better. And in this life, I'd made sure she got it. My phone buzzed, a notification from Second Chance Capital. One of our portfolio companies had just closed a Series B at a $200 million valuation. Another underdog winning. I smiled. This was my legacy. Not the money, though that was nice. Not the revenge, though that had been necessary. My legacy was showing people that they could rewrite their stories, that they could save themselves, that the people who underestimated them didn't deserve to be part of their success. I raised my glass to the stars, to the universe that had given me a second chance, to the girl I'd been, and the woman I'd become. We did it, I said softly. And somewhere in whatever realm exists for alternative lives and paths not taken, I hoped she could hear me. We did it. We won.